Hog Sty.
Hello, everybody. This is the Hog Sty. My name is Alex Cease. Well, no, my name is not Alex Cease because he abandoned us for like a trip to Switzerland, I think it was.
Yeah, he's
So
over in Europe somewhere.
that was Dave. I'm Steve. You're stuck with just us today. And truthfully, the show will probably be better without Alex anyway. So, maybe you'll learn some more stuff without having to sit through Alex. Don't you think? Possibly.
Well, yeah, we won't go off on a little rants and tirades he likes to pull us on all the time.
It'll just be my rants and tirades because mine are equally weird, but mine are just better than his. That's all I have. That's all I have to say. Mine have got to be better than his. But so Switzerland, I think he's in Switzerland. Have you ever been to Switzerland?
I have never been to Switzerland, but there was a picture that he shared where he was standing by this fountain of water. And you know how you take a picture, you put your hand next to it, take from a distance where it looks like you're touching it?
Yes.
So you say, yeah, I took a picture here talking about that. And that's where I came out and said, well, now you could show us the X-rated version. We know you did more than that.
We don't want to see that. Oh, no. I have been in Switzerland. It's a cool place.
I've never been.
The whole thing looks like The Sound of Music. All of it.
Really?
All of it does. Oh, yeah. It's it's a Swiss Alps. You know what I did? The only time I've been in Switzerland, you'll appreciate this. I was at was I Ramstein?
Ramstein, Germany.
I know it was.
Oh, okay.
I was at Ramstein at the U.S. Air Forces in Europe headquarters, and I had a free weekend. I was only there for like a month.
Okay.
Had a free weekend, hopped on a USO tour bus, that drove all night long into Switzerland and a couple other places. And so I was bussed through Switzerland, which was a fun trip, but hopefully Alex will make it out of there and everything intact. That will be good.
I know when I was in Italy, I had to drive my wife up to Germany, and we went to Bitburg, Germany, where we went to. And so she had a procedure done up there, and the whole drive up there, especially going through Germany, which is absolutely fantastic. You see these castles off to the side. It's just very picturesque. It's nothing like driving here in the States on the East and West Coast and so forth. It's just...
See, now the non-military people have no idea where we're talking about whatsoever.
Correct.
Y'all should have served. See, that's it. You should have served in the military. Then you would have known. So I'm not going to help you. I will not help you as to where any of these places are. Just look it up. Look up, proud military installations in Germany, and you'll find them, I guess. I don't know. Or alternatively...
make sure you say American military installations.
Yeah, that's very important. That is very important.
We don't need them to bring up a picture of a swastika somewhere because it's a remnant of...
That is actually illegal in Germany.
Yes.
They don't have freedom of speech like we have here. We used to have here. I mean, we seem to not have freedom of speech anymore, but that's, I guess that's
deteriorating. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. Happy Juneteenth, by the way. It's coming up.
Yeah.
Do you know what Juneteenth is? Is this a holiday in the state of Pennsylvania?
It is. It's recognized, but it's not considered a holiday in Pennsylvania. But Boeing does recognize it within the facility a little bit.
Well, thankfully, my employer recognizes it with an actual holiday.
Yeah, no. Well, see, don't forget, I work for a union shop, so all our holidays are negotiated. So that was never obviously part of the negotiation.
Hold on a minute. Wait a minute. You telling me you're a union member?
Yeah, I told you that before. And that's where you came out and said, I absolutely despise the union. I said, well, there are some pretty negative aspects of the union. I get that.
We brought you on this show under the guise that you were a good person. And now I hear you're in the union. This might be your last show. Let me just say. Of course, unfortunately, Alex is probably a flaming union supporter, so I will lose out on the vote. So we'll let you stay.
Well, I will. I do give an interesting perspective on the union because I was never part of a union until I came to Boeing. When I started at Boeing, that's when I became that. And And trust me, I see all the negative aspects of the union and things you talk about. It's all there. I get that, but there are parts of the union that are pretty beneficial internally, mainly. It goes beyond with them just saving all the dirt bags and everything. Which yes, you do see that, but they do a pretty good job on keeping the I gotta be nice when I say it.
No, you don't.
The bad bosses on, keep them at bay. The ones who want to be tyrants and everything on the job. One thing I've noticed in South Carolina and non-union shop in Boeing, and what the work conditions were like down there. I mean, the stress and the hassle they put them through from a big company like that. There are some benefits to it. I will say that.
All right, I guess, but you're excused this one time. Look at Dave is having to defend his life choices to the dude on, over Skype. Think about that. All my point was with all of that is I at least know what Juneteenth is, because there's holidays that I don't understand, like President's Day, for example. I would gladly switch like President's Day for Juneteenth Day, because I don't understand what I'm supposed to be celebrating. Am I supposed to be in general celebrating the majesty and greatness of the American president? Because even if you notice, even the media doesn't try to educate you in what you're supposed to be celebrating on President's Day. Because all the rest of them I can kind of understand. Labor Day, the American worker. Veterans Day, the American veteran. Memorial Day, the people who died in defense of the country. The 4th of July. Juneteenth is kind of a made-up holiday, but I get it. It's celebrating, the emancipation of the slaves in Texas, and as sort of, and it's kind of encapsulating sort of emancipation generally. I get that. President's Day, I don't understand in any capacity. What I remember is it was Washington and Lincoln both have birthdays in February. Yes. And so I think that they just combine it. Let's just call it president. But there's a lot of presidents I don't want to celebrate. That's the problem. It's like I would insist on going to work on that day just as out of matter of protest.
Right. Oh, trust me, I fully 100% agree with you on all that.
Well, speaking of protests and controversy, we have some Washington ownership news here today. A little bit. Little Danny is still in the driver's seat, floating out on the yacht in the middle of the med somewhere, but still in command. And the Josh Harris group, apparently the Harris group, I guess, has made a few changes to the structure to try to appease the finance committee. But Dave, you found some updates, at least one update that we thought was important here. So let's start with that.
Yeah, well, the NFL owners have reserved 2 dates, July 20th and August 8th, for league owners to get together for, I guess, an emergency meeting to vote for an approval on this sale.
Was it really called an emergency meeting?
No, I kind of added that.
Because I would postulate that a meeting that is planned for 2 months from now is not an emergency.
But they still got to go through the process of the whole con. I mean, even you said could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, right?
I would, yes, yeah. I would maybe call it a special meeting, not an emergency, is what I'm saying.
Special, sure, that's fine.
I'm just hassling you. It doesn't matter.
No, that's okay. Potato.
Yeah, this is pretty much exactly what I said would happen, which is, you don't do this kind of due diligence especially with 20 people or whatever the number is. Overnight, and the real goal, I think, if you ask me, the real goal from the NFL probably is to get this done before the season starts, and really probably before training camp.
Right.
That may not happen if August 8th is the day. Probably not, but they don't want to go into the new season with Dan Snyder still in charge, and so I would guess that's probably what they're aiming for.
Right. And I wasn't able to catch exactly what the outcome of that finance meeting was.
They don't exactly publish, public findings or anything. I mean, the rumor 2 weeks ago was that they were unhappy with the financing structure, and I explained why already.
Right.
They've got a bunch of, there's a lot of people. They don't like a lot of people involved. They had too much debt. They don't like that, and so they kind of sort of dropped off the radar scope a little bit, But now they're setting approval meetings, so you can read between the tea leaves and see that he must have made some changes. Either that or, they just agreed to live with it because they want to get rid of Snyder
Danny
so bad.
Boy.
Yeah, one of those two things. So, keep your head up, everybody. The long national nightmare is coming to a close. It's just going to take another couple months. So you have to hear people like us, postulating about this, probably till late July. But we did have one more, I think, far more relevant and important point that you saw. So why don't you tell us?
It was about the name and the name change. It was Chris Russell that brought it up. It was something from Ian Rappaport on Pat McAfee show. They were talking about the sale and the finance meeting, the outcome of that. Well, not the outcome, but they were potentially talking about it. And then Ian Rappaport added into that, and no, he is not going to change the name.
Yeah, specifically, this is Chris Russell's. Was a tweet. Let's see, June 2023 at 10:52 a.m. Eastern time. Says, so for what it's worth, at Rap Sheet, which is Ian Rappaport, said on the Pat McAfee show again recently, the New Englanders are not changing the name from #Commanders. Who knows what the truth is ultimately? But if that is, I think he's leaving a word out. He's trying to say if that is true, I salute them. It would be a waste of time, resources, and focus. It's a silly name, silly topic, and name means nada. I don't know about you, but I think it is important. Okay, the name all by itself has turned me off to this organization because I hate the name. It's a disrespect to Redskins. I just can't get behind it in any capacity. I think it's a really stupid name. And if I were Josh Harris, knowing the hell that this team has been through and what a low point it is, I realize it costs money and he's spending a fortune already, and it might be that. But to me, it's not a half bad idea to start completely over from scratch at zero and try to build a new franchise. Because this franchise, I got newsflash for everybody. Aside from like a handful of sycophants on Twitter, this franchise fan base is totally destroyed. There's not another professional MLB, NBA, NFL team that can't even draw like more than about 10,000 fans. Even basketball, even the worst basketball teams will get that in an arena.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where this team has been, especially the past like 2-3 years.
It's gotten real bad the last couple of years. Yeah,
it really has. And like our buddy Rick Snyder has been, he'll do estimates at games, and because he's there, and he says, yeah, it's like 10-15 grand, 1,000 people.
Right.
I mean, and mind you, the stadium was 78,000. They had what are they down to, like 60? Keep covering up seats because stupid. Yeah, whatever they are.
It's like 65,000 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's less than that now. But so I don't think it's that crazy. Personally, I would consider it if I were Josh.
Well, one, I completely agree with you. I got a conversation with someone on Twitter about this actually, because he was making a statement of, it's not a big deal. It's over. Redskins never coming back. Move on. It's time to grow up and everything under the sun that you want to say. And I'm like, listen, for fans that are young fans, had no idea what winning's like with this organization under little Danny Boy Tyrant, and fans like even Chris Russell, who is pretty much known as, well, some people say he's a New York guy, so he doesn't even really have any long-term ties with this organization. They had those feelings about this team and the name and everything, which is fine. I got no problem with anyone's opinions about the name. Everyone's entitled to it. I'm fine with that. But I made the point that what people don't understand, and this goes to you, more so you than me, because I became a Redskins fan kind of on my own. I didn't have the ties with generations, stuff like that, but you had a tie with your father. There's a lot of old, there's a lot of fans that have this name that goes back generations, and there's, it's become a fabric of of your family. Every Sunday during football season, it's, it becomes part of your family after generation. I made the point is like, when, well, it's only a name. Well, you know what? Go try to change the Eagles name. Go try to change the Bears, the Packers. And you see how well or what kind of response you're going to get from that and how far you're going to get from that. When you have a name that's been around for as long as it has and it has the history that it has, it's not easily forgotten. You just can't just move past it. It's going to take. In fact, some people have disconnected so much, like you have, to where you don't even consider yourself a fan of it anymore. Me, I've taken the avenue of, well, the Redskins are gone, that era is done. This is like an expansion team to me. I keep a very loose tie with all that, and and I get flack for that, but I really don't care. I have a hard time bringing it together. Regardless of how you may agree with that or not, people out there, but so when I see the name and especially how it was taken away from us, and it wasn't, and I don't care what anyone says, it wasn't taken away because Nike did what they did. It wasn't taken away because some politicians said what they said or anything like that. The minority owners put pressure, and they put pressure on Dan Snyder, and then all these articles of scandal coming out behind it, and he was like, and I call it a conspiracy theory, I don't care, but I truly believe Dan Snyder tried throwing the name rebrand out there to try to say, hey, listen, okay, here, take the name, leave me alone, and brush everything else under the rug. And he tried to use that. He used the name as a sacrificial lamb almost. I think that's part of the reason.
Some of that. I think he did do that, but I think the minority partners role was kind of leveraged because remember, I mean, what was ongoing at the time was that they accused Dan of not paying out dividends like he was supposed to do. And so I don't think it's an accident that, remember, who started the crusade really was FedEx. When FedEx said, we're going to take the name off the statement. By the way, I don't know if they can even do that, but all it took was the threat. I mean, there's a naming rights contract between the team, the stadium owner, which we're going to get into, and FedEx. Yeah. And FedEx can't just terminate probably because they feel like it. Sure. But just the threat of causing a big stink alone, was enough that was the moment that pushed it over the top. But I do think Dan threw that out there is like a, peace offering to the world, I guess. Right. Yeah, at the expense of the Washington fans. And to be honest, I mean, from a marketing perspective, the team cares less about you and I and far more about the 15-year-olds, and who and so I think they're banking on like we're going to go away or whatever, and they've got 50 years of the 15-year-old to be a fan. That's probably where they're going with it.
Well, sure.
But all the same, I mean, there's just a stink from the Dan Snyder era on it. It's not a good name of a team. It's a terrible name of a team. I would even be happy if they went back. I would probably if I would consider being back. I think I could get there easier if it was even Washington football team. I was okay with that moderately. Right.
Well, see, and that's the thing with that Commander's name. It has no tie whatsoever to the history. It has, if they went with something like Hogs, Red Hogs, if they went with something like Warriors, something along those lines that pulled into the history a little bit, or even if they went a little more off the reservation, went with like Wolves or Red Wolves, at least that had some kind of a Native American tie you could still play off of.
And the word red was in that, Red Wolves,
And people go, well, you're tying it to Native American because it's a spirit animal. The Eagles are a spirit animal. The Bear is a spirit animal. I mean, don't give me a break on the spirit animal thing. I mean, I say, I'm sorry, but the Native Americans can't make a claim to everything because if they did that, then you know what? We can't sit next to a tree outside because that means something to them in their culture anyway. So we need to, whatever. I mean, come on, it's just ridiculous. And when you want to go the military route, and this is where you and I have a pet peeve on this. When you name a team, a team of 53 players commander, you have 53 commanders. Seriously?
You don't have one. Yeah, 53 of them is zero.
Right. Now, someone sat there and said, well, no. Well, if you look at it, the commander-in-chief resides there. We have a bunch of commanders in the, there in the Pentagon and everything. And it's like, oh, so you want our team to be named loosely after a politician who's
it's either or a mid-grade officer.
Right. Yeah, right.
Because for those who don't know, the non-military cod, and the commander is an 05 in the Navy, which is a mid-grade officer, you know. it's higher than lieutenant, but it's if you want to go at senior levels, you got to go admiral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, it's just it's a cop out. It drives me just drives me bonkers, and the way the team rolled it out and everything was just awful. So, but in I do have to. We said this before the show. I mean, I stand up for Chris Russell. I know takes a lot of flack from the Washington fan base. We had him on the show. He was great to us. He didn't show any attitude or anything. He talked to us out. We talked to him for a while afterwards. He's a normal guy. Um, I respect kind of who he is as a person. So I'll take him at face value. And he's citing Ian Rappaport.
Right.
So the new report was that Rappaport said that on the Pat McAfee show. I mean, now you brought up a good point a couple weeks ago about it. I think it was you who, in a column, said, "What is the priority here for the new ownership group? Is it is the stadium? Is it the name?" Well, it all kind of starts with rebuilding the trust of the fan base, right?
Yes.
So you got to clean house. You got to burn the place to the ground, figuratively speaking. Get rid of anything and everybody. They're gone, and then kind of start anew, including Jason Wright. I think he needs. I would go. But from what you've told us, is what he did in Philadelphia, the 76ers, albeit not like immediately, kind of slowly, right?
Yeah. Well, when he came in, he bought the team. I think it was, I want to say, year 2 or year 3 of his ownership is when he started to, Sam Hanke sold him on the whole idea of the process and tanking to get the lottery pick and so forth. And he was behind him 100%. And all the flack that they got for that for the first few years of it, he stayed behind, which he stood behind Sam Hanke the whole process, which is why they call it the process, and he didn't succumb to the pressure from anyone from the outside. He didn't form any loyalties from those that were there when he bought the team or nothing. He was given a vision. He took the vision. He accepted the vision, and he went off with it. Now, I mean, there's a chance, sure, he comes in and he might get the idea that, from a vision from, say, like Ron Rivera saying, "Hey, listen, I mean, Eric Bieniemy would make a great head coach. I would love to move into more of a front office position, maybe as a team GM or something like that." And he could very well possibly sell him on that. I mean, I'm just throwing out there hypothetical on that one. That's all.
I mean, I don't know what makes anybody think that Ron Rivera would be a good GM when he's a mediocre coach, but no. I get your point.
Well, no, he's a mediocre drafter and a talent evaluator too as well. I mean, we've seen that. But
I just think he needs to start over, basically. So it's an interesting point. And I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I would be in the crowd of change the name because maybe I'll come back. But the idea that they would do it is it smacks a bit of, HBO is going to redo season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Right.
No, they're not. No matter, it was terrible. We can all agree it was horribly written and all that. But you can sign up. There was a petition that got like a ton of signatures begging HBO to redo. They're not going to do that, okay? They're never going to do it. It is what it is. You can hate it. I hate it. But it is what it is.
Yes,
terrible.
It was
but
terrible.
It is what it is. And change the idea that Josh Harris would come in day one and change the name smacks a bit of that, I think. I mean, I don't know. I would hope he would, but I don't think it's really realistic. And the other thing, truthfully, is you probably can drag in a good number of the 15 to 24-year-old crowd if you just build a winning organization. I will never come back, in the same way I was, at least. But you can maybe drag in a lot of the 15 to 24-year-old types if you just start winning. Winning cures all in football. A lot of things in football.
Yes, it does.
And this team, like you sent out a chart. I assume this is on Twitter somewhere this week. Oh, this is courtesy of 33rd Team, I guess. This was a chart showing the last time every team in the NFL
had 11
or more had 11 or more wins in a season. Okay, when you saw this chart, so we'll spare you because you can't. It's not a guess thing. Washington is last. It would in 1991, but it's not just that. That's not what's really bad about this chart. That Washington's last. The really bad part about this is, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember this question? What is the second to last team and when is it?
The second to last. I think that if I remember off the top of my head, the second to last team, I believe, was the Browns at 2002 or something like that.
I was about to say the Jaguars of 2007, but I didn't see the Browns in here. Let's see.
I could be way off on that one.
Let's see. No, the Browns are 2020. So yeah, the answer here is the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2007. And so for those of you counting, that is 16 years. And so it's not just that Washington's last by this metric; they're last by a ton. I mean, a half a generation in last. And that's a direct. So you combine the ownership just travesty of justice with the fact that the team never wins, and it's no wonder there's no fan base. And so the ownership group, yes, the name is a problem, I think, but one, they have spent millions of dollars, and two, the bigger issue really is just rebuild trust.
Yes,
that's job one, and that you're absolutely right about that.
You got to make this organization legitimate again. I mean, and every aspect of it, you have to make this into an organization where players want to come, fans want to come back, and, coaches want to coach here, and staff members want to work there for a long haul and everything. And that's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah, it is. Okay, we've beat that dead horse to the ground.
Yeah.
So, next thing we want to talk about here is a possible new stadium. Now, the reason why this is a story here for us is that I finally did some more digging in the real property records. For those of you who know me, know that I am a commercial real estate attorney, and I dug into this a little bit like 2 years ago, but I hadn't really dug into the real property records. This time I cracked the code, and dug into print. I am in Texas, not in Maryland, but I dug into the Prince George's County real property records and found some stuff. Wrote a column about it. It's the column is on our website if you guys want to read it. It was, what did I call this? Stadium Thoughts 2023 edition on June 12th by me. So, couple things. One thing that was interesting about the FedEx deal to me is the FedEx deal came from a place called, the site was originally Wilson Farm. That was what the name of the place. It was owned by a private owner. The private owner didn't sell it directly to the stadium entity. The stadium entity, by the way, is a company called JKC Stadium. That was Jack Kent Cooke Stadium, and Dan Snyder, because he's an egomaniac, changed it to WFI Stadium, meaning Washington Football.
Right.
But point is, the stadium was actually sold. The site was sold to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, who then flipped it immediately over to Jack Kent Cooke. Why did they do that is what I wanted to bring up. They did this to impose a bunch of deal points and conditions upon Cooke and the team. Okay, in other words, they couldn't really do that if Cooke just turned around and bought it from, the direct private owner, citizen who owned this thing. So one, this is a 30-year term, but the second thing is that if Washington doesn't play their home games at the stadium, then they could be forced to deed the property back to the government, okay, of the state. So that is motivation for them not to leave early. It's motivation for them not to move the team, before 2000. The magic number is 2027. This agreement expires late in the off season of 2027 in August. So that's the timeline. That's what you learn out of this, is that they can't move. You could renegotiate and pay them something to get out of it, but they kind of, absent that, they kind of have to be there. And there's some, like the state and the county both have suites at the stadium and things like that. There's a bunch in there, but what you really need to know is what I just said. And this agreement is much less than what I have seen in the past. By the way, just neither here nor there. But um, so that's I think what we've learned here is that I think it will be hard for them to leave early. Um, but I don't know. I don't know your thoughts.
Well,
Part of it. Go ahead.
well, the average time to even get a stadium designed and you bring in the bid, you have whoever going to come in to build it and break ground and so forth. I mean, you're looking what, it's 2023 now. By the time Josh Harris even really kind of does anything to move forward now, you figure it's going to be maybe around at some point this time next year, you would think, with some preliminary stuff being done in the process between now and then. But by the time they even consider even where they want to go, they get, whatever, bids or whatever from these states on, what they'll offer financially, and then they decide where they want to go if they want to move out of the FedEx area where they're at now or whatever. It's just, I mean, they're probably going to, because I know you mentioned the lease, they could probably do a year-to-year extension if need be, and I'm thinking that's probably what they're end up going to ultimately do anyway. I think they're going to get past 2027 mark anyway, before the stadium's even close to done.
Yeah, I mean, they could get it done in 4 years. It'd be a tight fit, to be honest. And even the the constructions alone is probably two-year thing.
Right.
I don't think it's impossible. I think it's very difficult.
Right.
A lot of these stadium planning goes on normally for much longer than 4 years. They don't even have a site. They need to get the free money from a state, either the state of Maryland, state of Virginia. So yeah, it's a definitely tight fit, and I could see them negotiate some out with Prince George's County where they could extend it, for another couple years, and and have
Now,
still the other thing. See, before, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's also tax exemptions involved here. Part of
right.
what the state gave Cook was tax exemptions, and so I don't. That's not clear based on the recorded document, because the recorded document that I was able to pull to the records is referencing the real agreement, which is not recorded, not public. Okay.
Okay.
And that's, you could maybe get a hold of it with a Freedom of Information Act request or something, but I didn't go that far into it. So that is going to have the tax exemption stuff in it probably. So there's that. So we'll see, but I don't disagree with you. I think it's possible that they will have to extend for a year or two, maybe.
Now, wouldn't it kind of make sense though to kind of, instead of rushing to get a new stadium built when that's going to want to boost in seat prices and season ticket prices, to maybe, take your time to a point on getting getting the design and the area you want to go to and so forth. Take your time on that, and in that process, try to get this fan base rebuilt back up. So you have potentially a stronger, more loyal fan base that's being built through FedEx on prices that most likely aren't going to really skyrocket too much because it's an older stadium. I mean, it's going to go up. I know that. It's just reality, especially if you start winning. I get that. But if you go into a new stadium right away, I mean, I'm probably way off on this, but you're probably talking anywhere from like a 30 to 40% increase in some instances in some seats, because now you're also talking about private seat licenses and stuff like that when you calculate all that in there. I'm probably a little too high on that. Maybe you know better than
me. Yeah. They owe a lot of money is the thing. I don't know if you are too far off. Yeah, because I mean, I wouldn't swear to the numbers specifically, but I think there's going to be a major price hike, because they've got to pay for, $3 or $4 billion in loans at a minimum. Right. We don't know the exact number. It's changing, but it's multiple billions of dollars. You don't get I put in the article, in the column rather. I just did a simple loan using my standard loan calculation software. How much would a $6 billion loan cost? Amortized over 30 years at 6% interest. $24 million a month. That's what it came out to. That's crazy. Now, again, I'm not implying that's their way their financing set up, but that's the ballpark. Okay, you're talking tens of millions of dollars a month. That does not, for those of you counting, for the slow people in the back, that is $480 that's more than $500 million a year. Okay. And now, if we think back to what we've learned in the past few weeks, especially about Washington's local revenue, was not nearly that much.
Right.
There's other revenue coming in from TV, granted, but that's a huge chunk. So the stadium costs are going to go up, and I think you mentioned them. The personal seat licenses, I get ready because they're coming.
Yep.
But I certainly I think if things go badly immediately or stay bad, and you don't, the last thing you want is to open a stadium and nobody comes. Like
Right.
you have your house party, not that I ever would, but you have your party and nobody shows up.
Yeah.
That's obviously what you don't want. So I think
Correct.
they
Yeah.
do need some lead time, but they're going to have 3 or 4 years to build. At a minimum, they'll have to 2027 to try to build a team at a minimum.
Right.
Now, the bigger issue to me, I'm firmly against any state giving significant amounts of money to a privately owned business like especially a football team to build something like this. And it's not a small amount of money, and it's not for like homelessness. We're
Right.
going to build like homes for people. We're going to build a community center, maybe. No, we're going to
Or
build
something for veterans.
yeah, a
Yeah.
program like that. It's for a multi-billionaire owner of the biggest sport in America, and the city isn't even only thing. What's the locality going to get out of it? Some wage grade jobs,
Right.
and I don't disrespect anybody's working. That's not my point, but you can't have a career out of being a vendor in a football stadium.
No.
That's like a side gig because it's not even a full-time job. It's a side gig. That's my point. I'm not disrespecting what they do, but that is not a full-time job. And if the team loses or keeps some portion of they don't pay taxes and they keep some portion of the parking and everything. This is public money. It's tax money. It's either tax money or bond revenue money, one of the two, which is from people. Why on earth should you give it to the NFL? I think that is
Right.
crazy.
Yeah. I agree with that. That's just. In fact, wasn't it? I think Maryland or Virginia was talking about with Dan Snyder offering what, like 500 million for
I think it was
stadium.
Virginia that started
Virginia.
that. Yeah.
Yes. And it's and I'm not one who knows a whole lot of the ins and outs of what you talk about right there, especially with the bond money side of it and everything. But I do know that it will affect overall, especially in that area, people's in terms of taxes. Yeah, it's just
Well, let me explain
because
what I'm talking
because
about then.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Because I'm assuming, especially in Prince George, just say they build a new stadium right where FedEx is at in Prince George's County right there, and I would think that much like how up here where Ridley Park where I'm at up here, they have like a special tax just for Ridley Park itself. It's like how Philadelphia, they have a city wage tax if you work in Philadelphia, so you still got to pay that city wage tax, but you still got to pay state taxes. It's like really, I got to still pay in it because I work in the Ridley area, but then I still got to pay my state taxes too on top of that.
Yeah. So
So
okay.
so more and more it gets compounded by that. That's how I picture that anyway.
There's a couple ways states and local governments raise money for this. One is just a loan.
Yeah.
Like the District of Columbia took a conventional construction loan out to build Nats Park and is still paying debt service on it. That's rare. More often what they will do is a combination of this. You'll institute some new taxes, but what usually the taxes that are instituted for stadiums are hotels and car rentals. Why? Because those are people largely out of town. And so it's a way that they can raise money from people who aren't local citizens.
Okay.
It's unconstitutional to tax people and only tax outsiders. Okay, that's against You can't do that, but this is a way you can effectively do that without really doing it. Who's got like you and I aren't going to stay in a hotel in our local hometowns, on a regular basis at least, maybe a
Right.
one-off or something. But by and large, it's travelers. So that's why. And then the other thing is bonds. And so like what a bond is basically you give the government money, and then the government will promise to pay you a return over a period of time. But
Sure. Yeah.
but you can't cash the bond in until a fixed period of time. This is how the finance lecture. This is how the federal government injects cash into the economy. For those you don't know, they'll issue bonds, and then they're really big bonds, so only like major national banks can buy them. And then the bank will turn around and sell it back to the government, and the government pays for it with new money. That's how, so local governments do that. They'll issue stadium bonds, and people will
Interesting.
invest in the stadium bonds, and then so now they have their money. Then they just have to pay it back over a period of time. Those are the two
Okay.
ways, for the most part. And then the other thing is again, if the federal government or some local or state government or some entity controlled by local or state government owns it, well, guess what's not being paid? It's property taxes. And so they're losing the property tax income while owing money from the bonds, at the same time. So it costs a lot or they're paying debt service on a conventional loan, which again is rare, I think. Um, no matter what happens, it's a fortune. And so what do they get back? Primarily the glory of having an NFL in your town. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to give a bunch of hot dog beer vendors a side gig, and that's good. But there's other side gigs out there.
Now, when you do a stadium project and part of that project, I don't know how many NFL stadiums have done this. I think SoFi was one that did to where the land that they bought was part of everything that they had done was is that they built up businesses, they built up residentials and stuff like that. Does that help kind of offset
Yeah.
anything
Okay.
that we're talking about in terms of that kind of tax money
Well,
like that?
yeah, but SoFi is very, very different. SoFi is totally privately funded.
Right.
SoFi is what the guy? What's the name of the owner? It's Kroenke. Kroenke is a major real estate developer. And so Kroenke's vision for that was what you're saying, which is stadium surrounded by mixed use commercial, retail, residential, multi-billion dollars. He spent like $4 billion on this.
Right.
And yeah, that would obviously help because he's not getting a tax exemption for all of that. I mean, he might be getting some of it, but certainly that's a goal. But Kroenke does that for a living.
Right.
Dan Snyder would have be Dan would have to get a real estate guy in to do that. And
Right.
Harris, maybe he can. He's also stretched pretty thin. Finally, he's got a lot of debt already. He's got on the team. He's got $4 billion in debt. Um, it's possible, but that's a long term plan. It'd be a lot easier just to build a stadium.
Yeah. Right.
Just like logistically, it'd be a lot easier. And the other question would be where it goes. That's why I wanted to bring this up since we're talking stadium here. In that, and we got to cut this off here in a minute. RFK Stadium site is no more likely, I think, than it was before Dan contemplated leaving. A little bit, maybe because they hated Dan and the name Redskins is gone. But remember, though, no matter what these reporters say out, these Washington beat writers, the federal government owns RFK Stadium. It is leased to the District of Columbia. The federal government owns that whole property. There's a name for it, and I can't. It's this name escaping me. But that's leased to the District of Columbia for like another like 10 or 15 years or something. And they would have to either renew the lease or sell it to DC outright. The federal government showed no inclination to do that for years.
Right.
Nothing's changed. The federal government's doing all kinds of other things, and nobody has breathed a word of that. So I think it's highly unlikely. And the other thing is the residents have made it very clear they don't want a stadium. So I think it's far more likely. And the other thing is DC doesn't have. Where's DC going to get $1 billion?
Yeah. Right.
They don't. They just don't have the resource that the state of Virginia or state of Maryland has.
Yeah.
So that's that. I did want to bring that up because I wrote this column about it. But the next thing we want to hit here there's been some Chase. We talked a little bit about last week. There's Chase Young. Yeah, it wasn't really a rumor. It was it was a site said that Washington will listen if somebody offers a Chase Young trade, and that hasn't really come to life. But Dave, you found some work about some maybe more concrete hypotheticals that might make some sense.
Yeah, it was there's an article by SI based off of taken off of what Bleacher Report was talking about, and part of the of a hypothetical trade. Now, granted, from what I read in the article, there's no rumors, there's no, hey, where there's smoke, there's fire type of thing. It was it's more or less, you're looking at, Chase Young, 5th-year option not picked up, which I don't think is really that big of a deal. They did the same thing with Duron Payne last year, and they got an extension anyway. I don't think it's really that big of an issue, but so when they look at that, they see that, well, there might be some contention there between both sides, possibly, and then you look at Arizona. Arizona is in need for defensive line. J.J. Watt is gone. They lost somebody else free agency. I can't remember on top of my head. So, but what they do have is a unhappy safety in Budda Baker. So what they proposed was a deal where we send them Chase Young and we bring back Budda Baker and a 4th-round pick. Now, granted, just like when I talked about this with Alex on Twitter earlier, he said, well, it's safety is probably our second best position on the team, which I could agree to a point. Sure, it's definitely one of the top 3 or 4, no doubt. But if this hypothetical trade did happen, and we made that swap, to me, that kind of tells me that maybe there's stalls in a contract extension with Cam Curl. And if you think that you're not going to get anything done there, and you have to decide between Chase Young and Montez Sweat anyway, and if they like Montez Sweat better, especially with seeing how Montez Sweat was last year with the rotation DNs on the other end, how effective that was, they might lean more toward wanting Montez Sweat long term. If they can't get a deal done with Cam Curl, they let him play out this year. You now have another guy that could play that Buffalo nickel they love so much. And how often do NFL defense play with 3 safeties anymore now anyway? We did that with McCain last year anyways. So you bring in a Budda Baker who's already signed. You give him more guaranteed money in the contract he has, extend him out a little bit more. Now you safety with him and Forrest back there. Now you free up an opportunity to keep Montez Sweat long-term potentially after this year. And Chase Young, you don't have to worry about anymore unless you got something back for him. Also on top of that with a 4th-round pick. Myself, I don't see Arizona doing something like that to begin with, to be honest with you. But that's how I kind of see it.
Well, also, I mean, is Washington? I mean, is it so bad with them and Cam Curl that they're ready to give up on it now?
I haven't heard anything to that light, so I would say no. I would say no.
Yeah, I mean, his dad mouthed off on Twitter. Yeah, granted,
sure.
But I mean, that's so what,
Because wasn't there a report that it might have been from his dad that the fact that he wanted like $18 million a year, something like that.
Yeah, I won't remember the number. It was some huge number. Yeah. But I mean, no, his dad should shut up. But I mean, that doesn't mean that the team is just done.
Right. No, absolutely.
And the truth of the matter is, teams don't like to sign large contracts during an ownership sale. This is inhibiting a lot, okay? And the reason is, like when you're selling an asset, you don't want to burden the asset with debt. Right. I'm telling you guys, there's football in the NFL is a lot more about money than it is team.
Oh, sure.
You're selling an asset, you don't want to have the credit card run up. You want to have the credit card at 0.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. And so it may be, no, I don't think Chase Young has earned a big contract extension, at all. It's not a crazy thought, what you're saying and what Bleacher Report, I guess, said, Bleacher Report SI, whichever one. But they've already put a ton of assets in. Surely there's something better. They've already put a ton of assets. And I think by that was a Budda Baker and a 4th-round pick is what they were proposing, incidentally.
Yes.
But
yeah.
They've already put a ton of resources into the defensive backfield. When is it going to stop? When are you going to stop putting DBs in, you know.
Well,
But
I mean, if you think about it, if you did a trade like that, I mean, in the back of your mind, you would think, well, at least if I was in GM shoes, if I was going to do a trade like that, I'm thinking right away, you know what? Who would want Fuller? Let me find a team that's going to want Fuller, and let me try to move him for something. Because you have Forbes, who's an outside corner anyway, you kick him to the outside. You know, Buda Baker's already shown that he can come down and play in the slot as well. You know, I'm sure Forrest could do that, but if nothing else, you still have their Martin, their second round rookie, you could put in that role. You know, so it's like, I mean, if you like Forbes that much, you know, where you were actually willing to swap up with New England and give up a potential future a potential future pick as well. I mean, then if you get Buda Baker in here, then you find a suitor for Fuller, even if it's for a 5th-round pick or a conditional 5th.
it would be
Something.
less than that. I mean, Fuller's contract is up in 2023.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, they could just cut Fuller. You know, I mean, his dead cap, he's got a $11.6 million cap hit and a $3.1 million dead cap. So, I mean, they would save a lot of money by just getting rid of him.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
think
I
he
mean,
has.
certainly be better to trade if they could, but they would get a very low pick for him, I think.
I think he has some value on the market. I mean, he's not going to get like a day 2 pick for him or anything like that, but
I
I think
think
he
he
has
would be
some.
a day two. I think he would be a day 2 pick.
When I don't think they would get a day 2 pick. That'd be a second or
Oh,
third.
I'm in a day 3. I'm in a day. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
he's probably a day 3 pick. Is what I was
Oh,
trying to say
absolutely.
it badly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah, I guess. You know, and I'm sure Buda. I haven't even looked at Buda Baker's contract. It's probably not small. Would be my guess.
I can't remember what there's. I believe it was like 2 years ago was when he got that new deal.
Well, we're about to find out if my internet doesn't crash on us, which it seems to be moving very, very slow. Because we're overburdening the system with our recording process here right now, unfortunately. Look, it's not a crazy thought. I think it's something that the team does need to think about, whether Buda Baker or someone else. It's an interesting thought. I got to hand it to him. It's an interesting thought.
Okay, so he signed a 4-year, $59 million deal with a signing bonus of $10 million, average annual salary of 14.75, total guarantees $33 million, and that contract, from what it looks like, started from 2020, and it goes out to 2024. 2025 becomes an unrestricted free agent. So if they did that, they would have a base salary of $13 million this year, with a cap hit of $16 million. It's $16.8 million. But I think the number you focus on a lot is the dead cap money, right? Which is 7.5.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Now that right there would be eaten up by Arizona, right?
Well, it depends on the terms of the deal.
Sure.
So there's different categories. Okay, so there's different dead caps for a release and trade, and it also matters when you trade him.
Okay.
You know, so it depends, but he would be more expensive than Fuller. You know, he's got a 6, but like you said before, you could extend him a couple years. You know, convert some of this. He's got a $13 million base salary in 2023. Take some of that, convert to a signing bonus, extend him a couple years, get rid of some of the cap hit. You know, I mean, that's what you'd probably have to do, you know, for him. So it's a thought. It's not a crazy thought. The more I think about it, I mean, trade for a freaking linebacker, man, for Christ's sake. That'd be my first vote. Which it brings us neatly along to linebackers. We always do this every week during the off season. We do our position group breakdown series. We've reached linebackers this week, and let me tell you something. It's a train wreck. I'm going to hand the reins over to Dave here because in our internal bidding, he got stuck with linebackers. So, Dave, let's start with a position group breakdown for the quote unquote linebacker group, if you can call it that.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Washington has certainly devalued this position. And the crazy part is that we have a head coach who's a former NFL linebacker and a defensive coordinator. That was. Can you guess?
A linebacker?
There you go. Yes. So it's it's pretty clear on what direction they've gone. Because even when I looked into the numbers a little bit, they've truly committed to only starting 2 linebackers. Last year when I looked at it, Cole Holcomb won the 7 games that he had started before he got injured last year. Now, he played in 99% of the 446 available snaps, right? John Davis, 85% of his 834 available snaps. After that, it takes a considerable drop off. When you had David Mayo filling in for 3 games, he only had 25% of those snaps, and Bostic, he only had about 29% of his available snaps. Everyone after that, under 10%. So what that tells me is their main focus and their main goal has always been a 2 linebacker set. And even when they lost their top linebacker, they used more of Cameron Curl and McCain to fill the role of what Holcomb was. And they would move John Davis around a little bit more, bounce back between the outside and inside and so forth. And so it's no surprise that they enter this offseason with the exact same intention.
So let's go over the group here real fast.
Okay. So what we have is John Davis leading the way, 3rd year. You have Cody Barton, who's going to most likely play that Mike role. He got from Seattle. Khalil Hudson, who's been a kind of a hot name again this offseason. David Mayo, Milo Eifer, Dejon Harris, who is a 2nd-year guy. Same thing with Drew White. He's a 2nd-year guy with the rookie undrafted free agent Farrod Gardner. And that is our group right there, unless I missed a name.
Barton, Mayo, Davis, Eifler, Nate Jerry,
Nate
Dejon Harris, and Clay Hudson. I believe Farrod Gardner is gone.
They still show him on their depth chart or on their roster right now. But it doesn't mean they couldn't have released him within the last week.
Well, sometimes that thing is not. Yeah, sometimes that roster that they do is not updated. Give me 1 second here. But point is, I've got him. Anyway, point is, that's it, folks. There's not one player on that roster who is beyond Davis who's any kind of regular starter. Cody Barton has not been a regular starter. Oh, okay. Farrod Gardner just got signed May 24th, so I hadn't updated yet. My fault. I said before, I think this is the weakest. It's the weakest group on the team. It's got to be the weakest linebacker group in the NFL, I would think. I just don't know what they're thinking. They can't put 3 starters on the field.
It's pretty close. I mean, when you look at Cody Barton, I know in Seattle there was a report out there from last year talking about his first 4 or 5 games of the year. He was kind of out of position. He wasn't playing. I forget exactly what they had said, but once they moved him into the full-time Mike role, and he was able to kind of play that role and play sideline to sideline, so his numbers did drastically change. I mean, there is potential with Cody Barton, but he just screams a little more athletic version of Cole Holcomb right now, as I see it at the moment. Now, it doesn't say that, look, we found a diamond in the rough. That's very possible, sure. And if Khalil Hudson can take a big leap forward, I mean, he's a former safety that's now playing a linebacker role. He could become a valuable asset in coverage, potentially pass rush.
Why do you think Khalil Hudson would all of a sudden take a big leap forward?
No, I said if he could.
Oh, okay. If he could.
Because right now, one of his biggest problems, and part of a scouting report and what you've seen on a small sample size thus far in the NFL, is he gets swallowed up too quickly by the bigger or offensive lineman. He has a hard time shedding them blocks. And if you have him as a starting linebacker going against these offensive linemen against the run, I mean, he's a liability.
Isn't this kind of saying, if only I had been born with more musical talent, I could have been Eddie Van Halen instead of somebody masquerading as Eddie Van Halen?
Yep. And if I had hair and a voice, I'd be David Lee Roth.
There you go.
See, I mean, absolutely. That's exactly what that's saying.
Yes, it is. I mean, but like, think about this, guys. Who are the starters? Jamin Davis and Cody Barton. Neither one of them have proved anything, really. And Cody Barton was not a regular starter in Seattle before he came here. And the rest of these guys, like you said, if you look at the stats stuff, dropped off the face of the earth in terms of playing time. None of them have really played. Cleek Hudson, I guess, would be next up. But like you said, he's a hybrid thing, safety, nickel back, Buffalo nickel guy. I just don't understand.
Now, I will say though,
thinking.
I will say though, and from what I've gotten so far with Jamin Davis, there was improvement from his rookie year to last year, especially when Jack Del Rio finally found the proper role for him. His rookie year, he had quarterback rating against him was 86.6, and he dropped that down to I'm sorry, I got that backwards. His completion percentage from his rookie year was 85.7 against, and he dropped that down to 63.5%. So, and then he dropped over 20 points in passer rating against 286.6. So he was about 106, 109 in passer rating against. So there was improvement there. I think Jamin Davis definitely has a role in this defense. He's a definite starter. He's a solid starter. But the problem is that when you kick him back in that Mike position, which there's going to be times where he's probably going to be relied on for that. That's where he becomes a liability. Yeah. He's a guy to sit down in the flat cover, tight end here and there, get after the quarterback, and just kind of play the sideline role. He's not a captain of that defense. I mean, not to say he can't become one eventually, but whatever.
All right. We're out of time here. So let's wrap up by saying, who do we think we always do it, the roster predictions here. You're up first. Tell you what, okay. I'll go first so you can think about it, because so the locks to me: Jamin Davis, Cody Barton, probably Khaleke Hudson. I think those three guys probably a lock. If they keep 5, I think probably Milo Eifler and David Mayo would round the group out. That's my thought. So Barton, Mayo, Davis, Eifler, and Hudson.
Obviously, the top 3: Barton, Davis, Khaleke Hudson. Yes. I would probably give the definite edge of Mayo over Eifler because of special teams. Mayo's a good special teams linebacker. But I'm going to throw a little bit of a wild card name there to watch in Drew White. Drew White was a 4-star recruit going into Notre Dame. And Drew White definitely had an athletic profile as a middle linebacker when he was there, coming out in the draft at that time. I haven't gotten far enough to see exactly why he hasn't done anything in terms. He hasn't played at all since he was drafted 2 years ago. I don't know exactly why. So I haven't gotten that deep to be able to see that. But he's healthy. He's playing. I'm going to throw as a wild card. I think he'll make the 5th spot. Drew White.
Okay. There we go.
There you go.
And that is going to do it for us for another episode of Hog Sty. We have run out of time in our hour here. We hope you have enjoyed us babbling nonsensically about football. And we will stay tuned next week. I believe we have quarterbacks is up next week for our position group breakdown. I know I'm quarterbacks, and I think I have to do it for next week. So we'll do that. Alex will be out another week, so you're blessed not having to put up with his nonsense for one more week before he comes back. And everybody have a good week, and we will see you next time.
Take it easy, y'all.